I don't want no oil spoiling my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes! Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus, and hello to those of you listening on the internet, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Joe DeMare, and I'm here with my fabulous co-host,
Rebecca Wood.
And we are bringing you an hour of For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a show where we talk about the environment, we talk about ecology, and we talk about how it affects you, your health, your wealth, your happiness. And I know this is a sports station, and I wanted to give a shout out and a thank you to the hosts of Black and White Sports there, because they're always so generous mentioning our program, and I just want to assure everybody sports is on its way. Don't worry, once this hour's up, 106.5 The Ticket will be right back to sports. But just for an hour or so, let's talk a little bit about the environment. Let's talk about what things do to support us and how to keep how the planet beautiful and healthy and livable. And right now, we seem to be in a little bit of a situation where the health and the happiness part of ecology are kind of in conflict. My wife and I went for a walk the other day, or actually it was just yesterday, and we ran into at least half a dozen households around our little 2 or 3 block area where people were having barbecues. People had friends over, and they were there in big social groups, and just completely they've broken out. They've broken out of the quarantine altogether, decided they've just had enough. And I can understand it. I can understand the desire, the need to socialize with other humans. That's something that we must do. But it really made me sad, because as an ecologist, as someone who studies the environment, you have to learn something about the spread of diseases, because that's such an important part of ecology. The way diseases spread and propagate really makes a big impact on populations in the wild and in natural systems. And I know from the numbers that we're not ready, that the United States of America still has a huge COVID problem, and we should not be opening up right now. But on the other hand, part of what's going on here is that we have all made this enormous sacrifice in terms of social isolation, in terms of our incomes, in terms of our lives for the past 6 weeks. And what the government should have done with that is used that opportunity to get a handle on the virus, to slow down, not just slow down the spread, but stop the spread. And they did this in New Zealand. And I was just watching the Prime Minister of New Zealand's report on April 30th, and just such a joy to watch something contrasted with the President of America's reports on the virus, where it's just a mess of irrationality and insulting the press. And, that's our president. In New Zealand, they locked down the way we did, and then they made it a point to find all the people that had COVID and isolate them and separate them from the population. And guess what? It worked. On the April 30th press conference on COVID, New Zealand reported 3 new cases of the disease. And they knew where 2 out of those 3 cases, who had transmitted the disease to those persons. And so they literally, in the whole country, they've only got 1 person that they're looking to see, okay, where did this person catch the disease? And they are reopening. They are dropped their threat level. They have now reopened 75% of their economy, and they've given out 134,000 tests. And so they used that opportunity. They took that sacrifice that everybody in New Zealand made, and they used it the right way. They used it the scientific way. And so New Zealand has beaten COVID. We haven't. COVID is beating us. I mean, we're over 1 million cases that we have acknowledged, and we've got tens of thousands of deaths, and they're all climbing. The cases are climbing. The deaths are climbing. Opening the country now essentially is taking those 6 weeks of sacrifice we all made and throwing them away. And so, yeah, there are people who've caught it and recovered, and those people will probably be better off once the disease comes back around, but there's no guarantee. And so I'm just saying to people that are breaking out, are you breaking ranks? And I want to ask, are you one of these people? Did you get together with friends yesterday? Are you planning to do it today? Such a beautiful day today. Are you planning to go over and just, had enough? 866-240-1065. This is the best show in the state of Ohio, but it does get better every time that you call. And we have a great show lined up for you today. The special guest today is you. That's right. We had a guest lined up. Unfortunately, the guest was going to be talking about Michael Moore's movie, and this guest was someone who was associated with the Sierra Club, which the movie goes into a lot of time attacking the Sierra Club. Unfortunately, the Sierra Club lawyers have sent messages down the line saying to Sierrans that you can't talk about the movie for legal reasons. I don't know, maybe they're afraid of getting sued by Michael Moore. I have no idea what their legal reasoning is, but I had to tell her, if I have you as a guest on the show, you have to be able to list your affiliations. You can't just be this person who talks on a topic without revealing your, the fact that, hey, you're associated with the Sierra Club. So I had to tell her she couldn't be on, which is just crazy, but it's just an example of what this movie, The Planet of the Humans, is doing to the environmental movement. It's really just trying to split the environmental movement in two, and we are going to talk about that in a few minutes. So even though I don't have the guest to talk on about it, I watched the movie and have quite a bit to say about it, and it's important, I think, for all of us to hear that. Did you see the movie? Give us a call, 866-240-1065. That's 866-240. Go ahead.
The deal is that it talks about alternative power, mostly, is what it's about?
Yeah, well, mostly what it's about is attacking wind and solar.
Okay.
It basically saying wind and solar are bad. We shouldn't be doing it. But we'll get more into that in a few minutes. But before we did, there's one or two other things I wanted to mention. One is, Rebecca, as you know, we have normally when we have this program in the studio. Right now, you and I are in our respective homes, going over the internet. But you go into that spacious radio station, and I like to go down into the basement area where they have the gym and the spa, and after the show you can go hang out at the spa and talk with the other hosts about radio, and it's just knowing you've got that kind of beautiful support behind you really makes you feel like you're doing something great. And of course we can't do that in our living room, so I just wanted to say this week I'm in the Italian suit. It's my best suit, and I'm wearing a really nice tie that I actually bought at the Museum of Modern Art in New York City a long time ago. So I've got that edge. All right, I'm ready to go, raring to go. And I'm hoping that our listeners are ready and raring to go too, and calling in at 866-240-1065. That's 866-240-1065. And Russell, I didn't mention this before, but the first caller that calls in, I'm going to give them a nice gift. So I'm not going to say what it is, but suffice it to say I think you'll enjoy it. And so, Russell, if the first caller calls in, if you could just get their name and address so we could mail them something, we are ready and waiting. So, all right, now on to the movie. So, Rebecca, I take it you have not watched Planet of the Humans?
I have not, no.
Well, you're not alone. Most people haven't. It's been watched by 4 million people on YouTube, but that leaves 296 million people that haven't watched it. But the thing about it is, it's good for us to talk about this, and it's good for us to go over this movie because it's an example. It's probably one of the purest examples of propaganda I have ever seen. In fact, it's sort of a textbook propaganda example, and it may actually be used in the future for teaching how to do propaganda. Up front, now, the accuracy of this movie. My estimation, watching this movie, is about a third of it is absolutely true, 100% accurate. About a third of it is a lie, absolute, straight-out, bald-faced lie, and about a third of it is somewhere in the middle. What they're saying had some truth to it, but a lot of it but not the way they presented it, and you had to pick it apart to get at the truth. So it's always better, if you're doing propaganda, it's always better to wrap your lie around in truth. It's much more effective that way, because people respond to the truth part and they say, oh yeah, that's true, I believe that, that's obvious, yes. And if they don't know the other stuff you're talking about, then they buy it. They say, well, I know they were telling the truth about that, so that means they're probably not lying about this part too. But of course,
it's kind of an old trick, actually.
Oh yeah,
it's like if you want to frame Jim for a bank robbery, you just go around saying, oh yeah, it's funny, I nobody can find that bank robber, but I saw Jim running away from the bank carrying a huge sacks of money, and he was wearing that red shirt he always wears, and he was humming. He was humming "Happy Birthday." He was whistling it, and then everybody's going to go, "Oh yeah, he wears that red shirt all the time, and he's always whistling that song." And so then it sounds like it's true. The rest of what you said.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what they did in this movie, shamelessly. But of course, he spent this movie. Its executive producer was Michael Moore, but it was actually made by a fellow named Jeff Gibbs. And another propaganda technique that he used, he spent the first 10 minutes of the movie convincing us that he is a fantastic environmentalist. He talked about how he wrote articles for Mother Earth News, and ironically, he talks about how he has a big house that he plunked down in the middle of the woods in Upper Michigan, and then he heats that house with wood, which is ironic given what happens later on in the movie. He heats his house with biomass, but he used all that to convince us that he's trustworthy, that he really is an environmentalist, and that's also necessary before you start doing anti-environmental stuff, you have to convince people, oh, really, I am environmentalist. And this is a technique which is often used. I remember when in Bowling Green, when we were fighting to get a plastic bag ban, one of the people who stood up and spoke against it had to start out talking for a couple minutes about how she always composts. That she composts everything, but she loves plastic. And so it's like, yeah, they have to put that in there. But he was basically, he talked about a lot of different things that were completely false. One thing, he started out attacking electric cars, and he was he used a lot of 10-year-old footage for the Chevy Volt. He was there at the launch of the Chevy Volt 10 years ago, and so he asked GM people who work for GM, about alternative energy. He asked them about wind and solar. And one thing, if you're in the environmental movement, you don't ask GM about ecology and environment. They're primarily a car company. They're there to make cars, and you talk to experts in wind and solar. But this is typical of the whole movie now. He asks people that aren't qualified, that don't really know about wind and solar energy, and he just takes their opinions and he just puts them up there as if they're fact. One thing that he pointed out in that first section where they're releasing the Chevy Volt is that a GM guy goes, well, look, there's no wind around here, so we didn't do wind power. That's absolutely false. There's lots of wind in Michigan, and if there were wind turbines to harvest it, there would be lots to power cars. And in fact, as regular listeners to the show know, I have an electric car. It's a plug-in hybrid. And right now, my plug-in hybrid is getting 85 miles to the gallon. Because what I'm doing is I manage, and it's not because I haven't driven anywhere. 3 times a week, I have to drive from Bowling Green to Rossford to take care of my 96-year-old father-in-law. But so I'm putting miles on my car, but I'm getting 85 miles to the gallon because I'm able to charge electrically at both ends of this trip. One of the things the movie says is that, oh, well, that's just coal power. You're just powering your car with coal. And it is true that coal makes up a major part, of the electricity mix. But we're moving away from coal. Coal plants are shutting down left and right. Here in Bowling Green, we get 40% of our power from wind and solar and hydropower. And we're working to shut down the rest of the coal plants. So, yeah, solar or electric cars do have a lot of electricity which comes from coal, as does literally everything else. And this is one of the big lies. This is one of the half-truths of the movie. A lot of times he's in there saying, oh, this energy's going over to a water park, or, this energy's going here, this energy's going there. That's not how electrical energy works. What we have is the grid, and all the sources of generation, wind, solar, coal, natural gas, they all put into the grid, and all the users take the power off the grid wherever they are. So there's one party's talking about a wind farm and saying, oh, this power's going over to a water park. And that's not how power works. So there's a half-truth. And so the idea is that we have to change the mix. We have to put more wind and more solar and remove the coal and the natural gas. And he glosses over that. And so one of the most distressing parts of this movie is that he says things like that electric cars produce just as much carbon as a regular gasoline car, and so you'd actually be better off burning the gasoline instead of going through all the hassle of creating an electric car. This is absolutely false. This is this is one of the complete lies that's been disproven over and over again with study after study. electric cars, especially plug-in hybrids like the one I have, produce less carbon than gasoline cars. Period. So, yeah.
So what is he? What if anything is he advocating for?
That's another problem with this movie. He's not advocating for anything. He's literally just saying, don't do wind and solar.
So it's just the status quo then?
Yes, pretty much. He's saying just the status quo. And that is an underlying theme of this movie is death. Is we should all embrace death. In fact, about halfway into the movie, literally most of the movie, he's there in this monotone, I went to a solar fair and I was looking at the solar panels and I saw, that's how he is most of the movie. At this one part of the movie, he's talking to this philosopher and he's saying, but isn't all this talk of wind and solar, isn't it just people avoiding death? Isn't it just people refusing to come to terms with death? And he doesn't have any solutions except die. That's the solution he's saying in this movie is that we should all just give up and die. And that he doesn't. Go ahead. Yeah.
I'm thinking maybe avoiding death might be a good thing. Yes, especially the death of everything.
Well, no, just humans. Yeah, that's what he starts out asking.
Oh, okay.
The very beginning of the movie, the very first couple minutes of the movie, he's saying, how long should humans, do humans have left before we die out? He just asks this of a bunch of random people, and so that's the underlying theme of the movie is how long should we stick around? And essentially in the middle of the movie, he's going, I think it's time we die. And then at the end of the movie, he has this really, I'm going to talk about it in a minute or two, this really terrible scene of death. And, so, yeah, he's not offering any solutions. He's not saying, except that, okay, and this is, again, propaganda. He's saying wind is no good, solar is no good, coal is no good, natural gas is no good. So, Rebecca, what kind of power does that leave?
Nuclear. Nuclear and more nuclear.
Hey.
Yeah.
Wow. Rebecca, you're so smart. Yes. Exactly.
I'm thinking that, he could, if he's sincere about this, he could lead us by example and go ahead and die.
You might want to suggest that to him. I'm not going to suggest that to anybody, but
maybe not.
Yeah.
It's almost like he's not for real, when he says that, because he's still alive.
That's true, and he's been alive for a long time, and
yeah,
apparently gotten really depressed, and it doesn't seem like he has any plans of taking his own advice there, as you say.
Right.
Yeah. It's full of these inaccuracies. One of these inaccuracies, and this, to me, this sums up the whole propaganda effect of this film. Very simply, what it is, he shows this graph, okay, and in this graph, it shows German energy distribution, German energy sources. Well, sort of. What it shows is a big pie chart, and there's just two tiny little slivers taken out of this pie chart. And one of them is labeled solar energy, 1.5%, and one of them is labeled wind, 3.1%. Now, one of the biggest lies of the nuclear industry and the fossil fuel industry is that Germany's switch to renewables has been a failure. And if you look at this graph, you have to say, wow, that's terrible. That only a total of 4.6% for wind and solar. The problem with this graph, and it's not explained in the movie, is what this graph is a pie chart of all of Germany's energy usage, not just electricity generation. I mean, that whole pie chart includes things like transportation, heating the houses of the Germans and cooling them, agriculture. Everything we do uses a lot of energy, and while it's true that if you look at all energy sources, wind and solar are a small part, they're still a huge part and a growing part of Germany's electricity generation. In fact, in 2019, wind and solar alone generated 65% of Germany's electricity. So if this movie had given people that information, pointed out that, we have, it's not all just about electricity. We've also got transportation. We've got agriculture. We've got all these other energy things where we're relying mainly on fossil fuels. That would have been a great service to the country, and it could have made this a valuable movie. But the point of the movie was to get rid of wind and solar power. And so all he did was, without explanation, put this big pie chart up there that made it look like wind and solar are doing next to nothing in Germany. And
so, but does the fact that if it's only a certain percentage now, does that mean that that's the maximum it can ever contribute, or does it mean it's only the percentage that it's contributing now?
Exactly. It is a growing percentage. He pays no attention to the trend. The trend in Germany is shutting down coal plants and nuclear plants and replacing them with wind and solar. That's what's happening. And the fact that it hasn't 100% happened yet means that he could make these statements about wind and solar just being coal and gas. And, he talks to other people. He's got this anonymous guy talking next to a wind farm saying that like you never get the energy back from wind and solar. Why? A utility scale wind turbine, you get all the energy back that you used to manufacture it, smelt the metals, everything. You get that energy back in about 11 months, less than a year.
Wow.
Solar panels, it takes longer. Solar panels, it used to take, back in the 1950s, another word for solar cells, they called them solar batteries. Because in the 1950s, you never did get back more energy than you put into the manufacture. But that has come steadily down as manufacturing got more efficient and as they learned how to do it. And it's gotten down to 4 years. After 4 years of solar power, you get back more energy than you put into manufacturing the solar panel. So, yeah, it's not instant. Yeah, it does take an investment, but that's the point. When you put up a solar panel, it's an investment in a clean future. It's not just blowing energy off in order to, do something crazy like build a wall between Mexico and the United States. It's something that will give us energy back. And he also plunked down there one guy saying some solar panels are only good for 10 years. Well, no. In my house, I have a solar panel that's 30 years old. It was made by BP. BP used to manufacture solar panels. And it produces power at about 90% of the rate that it did 30 years ago. So, no, solar panels and wind turbines solar panels may last up to upwards of 100 years. We're not sure because there aren't any solar panels that old yet. Wind turbines, they were engineered for 20-year life. Now they're discovering that they could replace parts they didn't think they could replace before. With regular maintenance, a wind turbine can last 30 years. So, no, they don't last forever. And the movie made a big point of showing this row of Mitsubishi turbines that are derelict, but they last a long time, and they give you back much, much more energy than you spent putting them in. So, yeah.
And I'm guessing the petroleum industry and all the other nuclear industry, they all have to, their stuff doesn't last forever either, does it? I mean, it's got to be replaced. Energy has got to go to replace it.
I hadn't even thought of that point, Rebecca, but you're absolutely right. Of course, you're right. Boilers break down in a coal plant and need to be replaced. Nuclear plants have the unique failing that as the nuclear reactions continue for decade after decade, gamma rays break out of the core and make the inside of the whole plant radioactive. In fact, it gets to the point where they're so radioactive you can't even go into the plant after 30, 40 years, and they keep shortening the shifts of the workers because just being there they get more and more exposure. So that's why that's one reason that they're so expensive, because you have to keep hiring more people to run them over the years, and and eventually the entire building becomes nuclear waste and has to be taken care of, taken down, and you'd have to build a new one. So that is absolutely true. And there was another falsehood. They're talking about intermittency, and intermittency is a myth of the nuclear industry. The fact that the wind doesn't blow all the time and the sun doesn't shine all the time, and people agree with that. People say, hey, it's true, the wind doesn't blow all the time. But what the situation is that the wind is always blowing somewhere. So if you have a lot of wind generation distributed over the whole continent, somewhere all the time wind power is going. And also intermittency with solar isn't such a big problem because the solar generation curve, as the sun comes up and goes across the sky, nicely matches the need curve, because most of us aren't using electricity at 3 o'clock in the morning when the solar panels aren't putting out. And so it's not really intermittent in terms of, on and off, as much as it is matched to when we need power. And then finally, of course, as we had guests on the show, and we've talked about this on the show, the battery storage technology is coming along to the point where intermittency isn't going to be a problem for any energy source. And so, I'm almost done talking about this, but I have to ask our audience, did any of you see Planet of the Humans? Have any of you gone to YouTube and watched that movie? 866-240-1065. And as I said, we're still waiting for our first caller, and who will receive that nice gift. And what is the gift? Well, you'll have to call to get it. There's one other point in the movie that really just had me gripping my chair and going, oh my God. And that is, he was interviewing a guy from FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And this guy from FERC was talking about intermittency, again, the phantom problem, which, by the way, if intermittency was a problem, Germany would not be getting 65% of its power from wind and solar right now. Anyway, he was talking about intermittency, and he was saying, oh, well, you have to ramp up your nuclear or your natural gas, ramp it up and down to match the generation of the wind and the solar, which is true. I mean, that's one reason that Germany was able to generate 65%, is because when the wind is blowing and the wind turbines are putting out a lot of power, they turn down their natural gas. They shut down their coal, which is great. No carbon going into the air. But what the big falsehood here with this interview with the FERC guy is, he said, oh, but natural gas plants can't ramp up and down like that. It's not good for them. Okay, A, that's a lie in terms of the new natural gas plants, which are designed to ramp up and down. But B, it implied, if you say, oh, well, nukes and gas have to ramp up and down, but gas can't do the ramping, that implies that nuclear power plants can. And that is an absolute lie. Nuclear power plants, because they operate under such tremendous pressures and temperatures, they cannot ramp up and down. And the few times it's been attempted, they've severely damaged the reactors, because metal doesn't like being taken from hot to cold to hot to cold to hot to cold, especially when it's under the 40 atmospheres of pressure inside of a generation loop at a nuclear plant. So this is
what everybody knows. Yeah. You can't take a pot directly off the stove and toss it in the sink full of water.
Right, or into
something
the freezer.
Bad will happen to your pot.
Right. If you take your boiling water and you dump it directly into the freezer, yeah, things will not things will not go well for you. So I could go on literally for an hour and a half about this, because that's about how long the movie is. But I do want to just skip ahead now, and so don't feel like you've got to watch this movie. I would say, unless you already know everything they're talking about in the movie, you're not going to be able to spot all the falsehoods. But one thing that happened at the end of the movie, it kind of summed the whole movie up for me, and that is that there was these heartbreaking films of this orangutan, and these orangutans were in this deforested area, and there was this one orangutan. He was walking through some muck after their forest had been destroyed, and these people reached down and picked it up. Now, the situation is, first of all, deforestation was a result of palm oil planting. And the movie never, ever talked about palm oil plantations. So literally he just grabbed this footage because it was heartbreaking. And then these people that picked up this orangutan, you would think they would help it. They would give it some food or some water. And they don't do that. Instead, they just sort of carry it around and show it off and just kind of manhandle it until it's laying there dying. And then they just show it dying. And
that's lovely.
So it's clear that this was not, they could have helped that individual orangutan, just like this movie could have helped the environmental movement. But instead, they just wanted some video. They just wanted some viral YouTube time so they could make money off it. And so instead, they just let it die. And that, to me, sums up this movie perfectly. Now, the one bit of truth in the movie that is worth noting is the idea of biomass, of burning forests for electricity. And that absolutely is a terrible thing, and I don't know of any environmentalists that actually promote that. But the point of the whole movie is there's a couple high-profile environmentalists, and that's what actually they're all about. This is the secret evil plan they have, that all this is so that they could make money off of forest biomass. That also, a lot of that is also exaggeration and not true. We should not be.
Okay, so wait a minute.
Go ahead.
We're promoting alternative power like solar and wind because we want to burn forests?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, and coal, and we want to burn coal and natural gas.
Okay.
That's what the movie is claiming, right?
Okay, but if we wanted that, why not just leave everything alone? Because that's what we were doing anyway.
Well, that's a very good question, Rebecca. I think Peter Gibbs' answer in this movie is that because some people will make a lot of money off of it, but doing it this way, doing the fake story, but in reality, this movie is just pure propaganda, and I think that's all we need to say about it. So,
okay.
Yeah. So now, speaking of making money, it's time for us to talk about our sponsors. All right.
There we go.
Our sponsor this week is the Wood County Park District. The Wood County Park District is a natural resources conservation agency. They protect natural spaces, maintain quality green spaces, provide engaging programming, and they teach people to love and respect nature. They restore wildlife habitats, and they lead outdoor adventures. The Wood County Parks protects natural spaces in Wood County for all to enjoy, and they're open from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset every day of the year. Now, there's several ways you can get in touch with the Wood County Parks or find out what they're doing. One is to call them at 419-353-1897. That's 419-353-1897. Or you can go to their website, wcparks.org. And finally, you can download their apps. Just go to any app store and search for the free app, WC Parks. So the Wood County Park District. And we're very grateful to have them as a sponsor. And we are also grateful to our patrons. We have loyal patrons on patreon.com, and they've gone to patreon.com and searched for a Green Future. And so they make a small, painless monthly donation, paying less for them, but it gives us a lot of joy because, we know these people are supporting us, and a lot of very needed help because it helps us keep this show on the air. So people who are interested in becoming patrons of For a Green Future can go to patreon.com. So, Rebecca, how are you doing?
Not too bad. How about yourself?
I'm good. And now we come to the point of the show where we talk about eco news. And I wanted to start out, we've got some good news right off the bat. And actually, this is a pretty upbeat eco news episode here. One of the nicest things that I've heard in a long time is that bald eagle nests, they just did a survey of bald eagles, and there's over 700 bald eagle nests in Ohio right now. And so we are, really coming back from the near extinction of the bald eagle. Finally, decades later, after they were almost wiped out, we can now say that Ohio has a healthy, growing population of bald eagles. And I think that's pretty cool. So over 700, it's almost doubled from the last time they did a survey, which was 4 years ago. So that's some good news. Do you see
is it true that
very often? Go ahead.
Is it true that there's one in the Midlands Park, that there's a nest down by the river in downtown?
I believe so. I know that
I've heard that.
I think there's on the order, if I remember correctly, there's on the order of like 30 or 40 nests in Lucas County. So
wow.
And then Ottawa County has a ton of nests, which isn't too surprising. But Sandusky County has a lot. Yeah, this area of northwest Ohio, especially along Lake Erie, if you want to see bald eagles, there's a lot of places you can come and actually see them. So it's worth making the trip. So that's some good news. Now some bad news. Trump's border wall is progressing, and even as he doesn't help the American people with COVID, he is spending billions to build this border wall. And the reason this is bad environmental news is that he's going right through wildlife refuges, and he is blocking migration routes for animals like antelope that need to cross back and forth across the border. And so he could drive antelope in those regions to extinction, because animals don't migrate just for the fun of it. They don't go, oh, let's make this 500-mile trek because, what else are we going to do? Just sit around and eat grass? No, they migrate in order to do essential things like find food, find places to mate, have safe places to have calves. And so if you block migration routes, you may just wipe out entire populations of animals and endangered species. So that's some bad news. But over to some other news, some pretty good news. Our friends at Center for Biological Diversity have released a statement. They have now filed over 200 lawsuits against the Trump administration. They've crossed the 200 line. And the good part of this news is that they have won, so far, they've won 9 out of 10 cases that they bring against the Trump administration. So this is good news in terms of the fact that there's somebody fighting the Trump administration on all these terrible decisions, and they're winning 9 out of 10 times. But one reason this is important to note is we have to realize that means that the Trump administration tried to break the law 9 out of 10 times. That what the Trump administration was trying to do was illegal, and the courts agreed with that once they looked at it in terms of the laws that Center for Biological Diversity is citing in these lawsuits, because they're not, Center for Biological Diversity isn't bringing the lawsuits to get money. to sue the Trump administration. Hey, you're destroying this wilderness. Give me $5 million. No, they're bringing these lawsuits to protect the wilderness and to protect you and me from things like mercury pollution and having foul air that we can't breathe. So 9 out of 10 times the Trump administration is trying to get away with breaking the law, but the Center for Biological Diversity has stopped them. Go ahead.
The thing is, I mean, we're talking about how antelopes, say for example, are naturally migratory and they need to move around to find the things they need. Well, arguably the same could be said about humans in a lot of ways. I mean, really, like, migrating when you don't have what you need where you're at is the most natural thing in the world for us. We started out as hunter-gatherers, which meant when the game dried up in one area, we moved. People want to act like it's this sinister thing that people are trying to do, but no, it's a completely natural behavior on our part. It's what we're kind of designed to do as intelligent beings. Like, don't have what you need here, go someplace else.
Yep. I mean, wanderlust is a natural thing. You could embrace it. Don't be ashamed of it. Yeah, that is something we do. Now, we need to put biological constraints on this wandering. I mean, one of the things they're talking about in New Zealand, now that they've cleaned up their island, that they've essentially eradicated COVID from their island, is having a quarantine period for people who come into the country. And frankly, we should have been doing that all along. We should have been doing that with every time you go to a new continent. You should have a period of time where you have to wait and make sure you're not carrying some terrible disease into that continent. But people talk about the inconvenience of it. Well, convenience is not necessarily a virtue. If it's convenient but it kills you, it's not something you should be doing. So, we can have wander, we can have travel, we can have all the things that we want to have, but if we recognize the reality of biology when we set these things up, we can have all that in a green, in a sustainable manner, and that's what we need to do. Just one more little bit of eco-news I wanted to talk about, and that is that on April 20th, on the website phys.org, there was a story there called Ecology-Based Economics Can Avoid Future Catastrophe. And one of the worst parts of the whole movie thing, the Planet of the Humans, is that the 50th anniversary of Earth Day became all about that movie. Instead, what we should have been talking about are things like this article in phys.org. They are pointing out that we could have a green future, that if we just add science into our economics and our politics, we can have everything we want. We can have green energy, we can travel, we can heat and cool, we can feed ourselves, we can have nice clothes to wear, we could go to nice places, there could be nice places. All we need to do is take into account the reality of science, and like they're doing in New Zealand, where they've managed to open back up 75% of their economy, and they're on their way to opening their economy all the way back up. And we're opening our economy, but ignoring the realities of science, which means in about 2 weeks, we're going to have to close it all down again. And this crisis is going to be extended probably out at least until fall, maybe till Christmas. And
Joe, truthfully, that is what bothers me about the whole lifting quarantine thing. Sure, I'm bothered about the loss of life, especially targeting how it's going to target minorities and disabled people. But really, like, I can take it, mental health-wise, if we just do one long quarantine. Yeah, to me, like, if we stop and start over and over again, which we're going to end up having to do, I mean, it's like a cat and a mouse, where the mouse thinks it's free and then the cat clamps down on it again and draws it back, and I don't know, it's just much harder for me mental health-wise, knowing that it's going to come back over and over again,
Yeah, And the problem, of course, is that every time you go through a cycle like that, fewer and fewer people are going to go along with it. But right now, 80% of the country, 75 to 80, depending on the survey, want to continue the restrictions until COVID is beaten. But
I'm gratified by that. Americans are not as stupid as you sometimes worry they might be.
No, and I make this point quite frequently, is that we are being governed by an obnoxious minority, or very small minority, like a quarter to a third. If we had a stronger democracy, none of them would be in power. If the will of Americans were really reflected in our democratic process, we wouldn't be at the mercy of this obnoxious minority that does not know what they're doing. Or if they do know what they're doing, are incredibly evil.
Mm-hmm.
So I like to give them the benefit of the doubt. But
people have a way of
go ahead.
People have a way of not knowing, purposely, I think, not knowing when they're doing something horrifically evil. It's just like, I'm just going to not know that,
Well, we saw that in the governor of Georgia when he claimed not to know that asymptomatic people can transmit the disease, even though that had been like front page news for 2.5 months at that point. So yeah, deliberate not knowing to me is evil, because we need knowledge. We need to know what we're doing, or we're just going to muck things up. So, all right. Well, but we do know that eventually we are all going to figure this out, that we're going to have a green future, that things are going to get better eventually, because now, how do we know this, Rebecca?
Oh, did you get another letter from the future?
I did.
Oh, boy.
I got a letter from my great-granddaughter, Marie I. Yes, and every week there's this flash of photons next to my bed on the day I'm going to do the show, and there's this letter. So here's this week's letter from the year 2300. Dear GGG, well, it looks like I'm definitely going to get better. In fact, the doctors say that I'll be able to leave the hospital soon. My white blood cell count is almost back to normal, and I definitely feel stronger. Michael is still in a coma, and the doctors have decided to keep him there for another month to give him the best chance of full recovery. Sam and I have decided to head back to Ohio and stay in our ancestral home in Bowling Green for a few months while I recover. I still need help to get around, but I am able to move around the room with my walker, and I'm really looking forward to getting back out into the sunshine. For some reason, my thoughts keep going to the Slippery Elm Trail. I know from your writings that you and great-great-grandma used to love walking along it. Back in your time, it only ran from Bowling Green down to North Baltimore. Now it goes all the way down to Cincinnati, just like the old rail line did.
Cool.
In fact, there's a recreation of the old line on part of the trail. But the biggest difference is that now the park extends 100 feet on either side of the trail all the way down. Someone walking the length of the trail could expect to see signs of bear, wolves, and bison, and bald eagles by the score. I've just decided I'm going to walk the whole length of the trail. That's when I'll know I've recovered. Thanks, GGG. I'll write next week. Love, Marie I. So, there we go. So there is hope for the future. Go ahead.
What I want to know is, like, is Bowling Green is the whole area still mostly Northwest Ohio farmland, or have they let the ditches fill up and has some of it gone back to being swamp?
That's an excellent question, Rebecca. I will write, because I can write to Marie I. She actually has a trunk of my letters that she's opening one at a time each week. So.
Oh, there we go. Okay, so or maybe she has access to old tapes of the show. We don't know.
Yeah, both. I'm sure, but,
right. Yeah.
I will ask her. I will ask her that, and
okay.
we'll have an answer for that next week. We're almost done here. Russell, I don't know if we're going to hear the closing music come on, but I just want to thank everyone for listening and tell everyone, don't buy into this Planet of the Humans. Don't give in to despair. That's the main message of Planet of the Humans. We can figure this out. We can solve the problem. We can have a green future if we all try to do that. And wind and solar are definitely a part of that green future. So thank you all for listening. Rebecca, any last words? Any parting thoughts?
Not particularly, but I heard the Monarchs have reached Canada this week.
Oh, the ones coming up from Mexico.
Yep.
Nice. Very nice. All right.
It is.
This is Joe DeMare.
And Rebecca Wood.
And we're signing off.
Bye-bye.
I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No